college every year.
All right, I'd like to welcome everybody and call to order the 2025 Budget Committee meeting and start with the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We'll go ahead and do. Everybody can just say their name and that they're here. We'll start with Mr. Truitt.
Pete Truitt here.
Christy Cockey here.
Nicholas Hafez here.
Brad Farrell here. George Miller here.
Valerie Ingram here.
Pete Bauer here.
Belinda Fisher here.
Mark Everett here.
David Anderson here.
Susanna West here. And include here.
Great. I would like to make the motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you so much. Would someone like to make a motion to approve the April 22nd, 2025 meeting minutes?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Great,
Second.
great. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. And now we will turn it over to Dr. West for the budget message.
Yes, thank you so very much. Welcome. This is an important process for a school district. We do this once a year where we engage with our community around the creation of a budget. Tonight, we have a lot to share with you. Starting with the budget message, we do have the proposed budget in front of you. If you turn to the green tab, you can follow along with the budget message. If you'd like to do so, I'll go ahead and get started. So again, I'm honored to share with you tonight our proposed budget for the 25 school year. This message is meant not only to explain the details of the budget itself, but also share the thinking, values, and priorities that shape how we allocate resources and make decisions. At its heart, this budget continues to reflect what we believe to be true, that every child matters and that every student deserves the opportunity to learn, grow, and graduate prepared for a choice-filled life. Like every year, this process asks us to balance hopes with realities, to hold tight to our mission while responding to the financial challenges in front of us. Oregon's ongoing underfunding of K-12 education, the rising costs of goods, services, and personnel, and continued enrollment decline all shape the decisions we make. But even in the face of these pressures, our commitment remains steady to protect the programs and investments that most directly support student success. So what guides this budget? When we sit down to plan our budget each year, we start by asking, what does it take to help every student thrive? Our answer hasn't changed. It takes great teaching, it takes targeted supports and strong systems, and it takes schools that are safe, inclusive, and welcoming for all. Our budget continues to prioritize what we know works. We are focused on the fundamentals: literacy, bilingual education, academic rigor, career and college readiness, social emotional well-being, and student engagement. These aren't just numbers on a page, they represent real opportunities for students and real commitments from our staff. We also know that the most important investment we make is in our people. Our teachers, support staff, counselors, coaches, and leaders are at the heart of everything we do. Whether they are teaching in classrooms, driving buses, preparing meals, or keeping our schools safe and clean, every one of them plays a part in supporting our students. That's why this budget keeps professional learning, staffing, and supportive work environments at the center of our financial plan. So I want to start by pointing to where we're seeing some progress with the investments we're making. At Forest Grove School District, we remain focused on the fundamentals of student learning and well-being, because when we get these right, great things happen for kids. Despite the challenges facing public education, our students continue to show growth, achievement, and resilience. These successes are not by accident. They're the result of the daily work of skilled educators, strong systems of support, and the belief that every student has the potential to thrive. Several key academic indicators demonstrate the strength of these efforts. Ninth grade on track, 85.9%. This is great growth and it's above the state average. Regular attenders, 66.2%. This is also an increase for us over the previous year. And our four-year cohort graduation rate at 82.9% is also above the state average. These outcomes reflect our investment in aligned instruction, data-informed decision-making, and student-centered supports. Our approach is rooted in the understanding that academic success is deeply connected to relationships, engagement, and a sense of belonging. Whether through classroom instruction, small group interventions, counseling services, or family partnerships, our focus is on keeping students connected to their goals. One of the cornerstones of this work is our investment in early literacy, where we know the greatest long-term gains begin. Our $1.7 million investment since 2022 in literacy curriculum, grounded in the science of reading and aligned with Oregon standards, continues to shape positive reading outcomes in both English and Spanish. Literacy specialists and ongoing professional learning ensure that this critical work is supported and sustained across our schools. In addition, our dual language program, now expanding into middle grades, supports biliteracy as both a skill and an asset. With 37% of our students learning in 2 languages and 1/3 of our K-5 students identified as English learners, we are seeing significant success. Former English learners who exit services before high school are graduating at an 85.8% rate, higher than both the district and statewide averages. Part of our focus is preparing students for a choice-filled future. Life beyond high school is at the core of our mission. A choice-filled life means students graduate not only with a diploma, but with the skills, confidence, and real-world experiences that open doors to future opportunities, whether that's college, career, or something in between. At Forest Grove High School, we continue to expand access to rigorous academic opportunities. Students have the option to take 23 advanced placement courses and participate in dual credit programs through the Willamette Promise. In the last year alone, 135 students earned 872 college credits, saving families over $180,000 in tuition costs. These early college experiences provide students with both the challenge and the head start that many families are seeking. Our commitment to 9th grade success remains a priority. Thanks to the leadership of our 9th grade success team, we reached an 89.9% on track rate last year, our highest since joining the 9GS network. These gains include a 6% improvement for historically underserved students. The strategies behind this success are grounded in relationships, positive adult connections, intentional outreach to families, and student-led projects that promote belonging and inclusion. We also recognize that college is one of many great options for our graduates. That's why our career and technical education pathways play such an important role in preparing students for their future. With 14 CTE programs, including health services, early childhood education, business management, culinary arts, engineering, and construction, our students gain hands-on experience and industry-recognized skills that prepare them for employment and post-secondary education. CTE concentrators continue to outperform state graduation rates with a 91.3% on-time graduation. One of the most powerful examples of career-connected learning is the Viking House Project, which is now in its 50th year. We're really excited about this. This program gives students the opportunity to design and build a home from the ground up, applying the principles of math, science, construction, and teamwork to a real-world challenge. Viking House stands as a symbol of what's possible in learning as rigorous, relevant, and connected to life beyond the classroom. For students who need a different pathway, our Community Alternative Learning Center continues to provide a supportive, flexible environment where students can work towards their diploma at a pace and approach that fits their individual needs. Calc's blend of in-person and online learning combined with personalized support and counseling ensures all students have a pathway to success. These programs, opportunities, and pathways reflect our district's commitment to prepare students not just for graduation, but for the future they choose, with the knowledge, skills, and confidence to pursue their dreams. You'll see our budget also reflects the bond improvements that we're working on. Just as we invest in teaching and learning, we are also committed to ensuring that our learning environments are safe, modern, and built for the future. Thanks to the trust and partnership of our community through the 2022 Capital Bond, we continue to make steady progress on projects that improve facilities across the district. One of the most significant projects is the replacement of Cornelius Elementary School. After nearly 80 years of service, the original building is being replaced with a new 2-story, 76,000 square foot facility designed to serve 500 students. The new school will meet seismic safety standards, provide flexible learning spaces, a family resource center, and pre-kindergarten classrooms, reflecting our commitment to both safety and inclusivity. Bond funds of $121 million are also supporting seismic retrofits and security upgrades district-wide, expanded CTE facilities at Forest Grove High School, enhancing access to hands-on career-connected learning, healthy and modernized spaces that support student well-being and engagement, and one pre-kindergarten classroom at every elementary school. The Citizen Bond Oversight Committee continues to meet regularly, providing important oversight and ensuring that bond resources are used responsibly and transparent. We are facing a tough year next year, however. While there is much to celebrate, we are also navigating serious financial challenges that shape this budget. These include years of state underfunding of K-12 education, with Oregon's $11.4 billion biennial budget falling short of what's needed to fully fund the quality education model. Rising costs for salaries, health insurance, goods and services driven by inflation and contractual obligations. Enrollment decline, now over 130 students below projections, directly reducing revenue under the state's funding formula. Adding to these challenges is uncertainty at the federal level. Several one-time federal relief funds that help stabilize school budgets are expiring, and there is growing concern about potential reductions to federal programs like Title I, special education, and school nutrition. While immediate cuts have not been confirmed, this environment of uncertainty calls for cautious and conservative budgeting in the year ahead. As a result, this proposed budget includes a $1.8 million reduction in general fund expenditures. These reductions are necessary after several years of declining enrollment, increasing costs, and deficit spending, and are essential to maintaining district reserves through the end of this biennium. A significant portion of our budget, like most school districts, is dedicated to staffing, as people are our greatest resource and expense. However, the reality of sustained enrollment decline means we can no longer justify the number of full-time equivalent positions currently in place. In a system where funding is tied to student count, maintaining the staffing levels that exceed enrollment is not financially sustainable. Therefore, this budget includes reductions to FTE across the district. These staffing adjustments are being made with great care and deliberation. Our goal is to minimize the impact on existing staff wherever possible through attrition, retirements, and unfilled vacancies. We are committed to managing this reduction responsibly and transparently, keeping student needs at the forefront of every decision. Even with these reductions, our focus remains clear: protect direct services to students, minimize classroom disruption, and preserve the programs that support student learning and well-being. These are difficult but necessary steps to ensure the long-term health and stability of our district while continuing to invest in the success of our students. At the heart of this planning is a commitment to our students and a focus on our strategic and integrated plan goals, which prioritize the following: high-quality instruction, ensuring all students experience rigorous, engaging instruction that closes opportunity and achievement gaps; behavioral health and wellness, supporting student well-being through trauma-informed, strength-based, and culturally responsive systems; family and community engagement, honoring and amplifying the voices of families and community partners through accessible communication and authentic engagement; organizational resilience, building safe, healthy, and sustainable systems that support collaborative environments and continuous improvement. Each decision in this budget is aligned to these goals. We continue to invest in targeted instructional supports, maintain ASCA-aligned counseling ratios, and reinforce systems that build student attendance and engagement. We believe in the power of public education to teach students the skills they need. Whether a family is still climbing or has achieved economic security, public schools were part of virtually every family story. The heart of Forest Grove School District remains strong. Our students continue to show resilience, brilliance, and heart. Our staff continue to show care, creativity, and commitment, and our community continues to show unwavering support for our schools. This budget reflects both the values we hold and the realities we face. I want to thank our board of directors, budget committee members, staff, families, and community for your partnership and trust. Together, we will continue to care deeply, stand strong, and adapt and grow, ensuring that every student graduates ready for their next step in a choice-filled life. Thank you. To Director Hu.
So tonight we'll talk a little bit about a quick review of our budget committee roles, spending principles. We'll go into the proposed budget highlights that are included in the budget document itself. There will be an opportunity for public comment tonight, and then it'll be a discussion, deliberations, and comment within the team. As we go through this, please feel free to ask any questions you have. This document in front of you is yours, right all over it. There's sticky tabs there, earmark things. The slide deck, when I'm pulling information out of the budget document itself, there'll be a little page number at the bottom of it referencing what page it's coming from. So if you want to see more information on that topic individually, it'll direct you right to that. So we will go ahead and get moving. Just a reminder of where we are in the budget committee process. This is the first budget, well, the first official budget committee meeting. Tonight it's the delivery of budget message, the proposed budget. We will have up to 2 more meetings after this to discuss and deliberate and provide more information. Ultimately, at the end, we want more, ultimately at the end, we would like Christy, I'm sorry.
I just don't need my post-it notes. Sorry, probably got there now. Apologies. I'm ready to roll, please.
Ultimately, at the end of this committee and this process, this committee is to recommend a budget to the board for adoption. And so that will be in June for us to be able to officially start expending on the new budget July 1. Reminder of budget committee roles and responsibilities. The budget committee is really to receive the proposed budget, review it, discuss it, ensure it meets and aligns to our district priorities, consider additional input and community input through the public comment process, and then ultimately recommend a level of spending appropriations. Just a quick reminder of what is not the budget committee's role. We don't set specific salaries for individuals or contract terms, set staffing levels, or make large structure decisions. That's really the board's responsibility and administration. And then alter district goals or policies. Again, those are board and administration. At the end, the budget that you're recommending to, yes, please. At the end of the day, what we're looking for is a recommendation to the board to set our maximum appropriations for spending for the 25-26 fiscal year. And that is by major fund and major function. So general fund instruction, general fund support services, and so forth. This is an example, and this sheet is in the back of the book. And it is based on all of the information that is in the packet today. After conversation and discussion and deliberation, there is a couple of options you have as a budget committee. You can approve the budget as it's proposed. You can increase appropriation in an area if you believe we will get more resources. You can decrease appropriation in an area if you, in major function, fund and function, if you think we will get less resources, or you can move appropriation between major functions. So from support services to instruction, or instruction to support services. By the budget committee, it goes to the board for adoption. And then this sets our limits for spending for next year. However, if additional resources do come available or legislation changes, then we do have the approval to go to the board to ask for an increase in appropriation based on that unknown item. With us being in a legislative year, we have a lot of assumptions in this budget. And there's a lot of changes that could potentially happen after this budget is adopted by the board. And so there is a probability that that could happen. So we would just go to the board and ask for appropriation increase for a particular, either instruction or support services, based on that change in resources. If there's less resources, we don't necessarily have to go to the board because we're setting that maximum amount. However, we will internally make those adjustments.
I want to talk a little bit about some of our guiding principles. We did touch on this in previous conversations, that when we were building a budget, we have many competing demands. Those are the arrows that you see on the outside of the circle. There are some things that we must do. We have legal requirements we must meet. We have contractual requirements that we must meet. We have guidance from the Department of Education that we are held accountable to. Those factors must be built into our budget process because they are requirements of school districts. In addition to that, we seek feedback. You saw some feedback previously from our students, from our families, from our staff, from our community. We read that and we take it to heart, and we ensure that the budget that we are building is addressing those top priorities that our community have told us matter to them. And also taking into consideration the things that our community has told us that they feel like we could prioritize for reduction. And you're going to see some follow-up with that in the message here today. These demands are sometimes competing, as we talked about last time. Our business is educating kids. We are going to buy curriculum. We are going to invest in the professional learning of staff. Even though we did hear from some people that curriculum doesn't matter, that could be one of the things that we could cut. We still need to educate kids. So that those things sometimes seem to be in conflict with each other, and we try to balance that through this process.
In the front of your budget book, I have an insert. This is just more data of the next slides that I'm going to go over. I have a couple of charts. One of the questions that came up in the last meeting that we talked about, we did a survey on budget priorities this winter with our community and our staff, and we talked about it a little bit last time, but we were able to actually go through the information. This is just kind of a summary of what we heard through that. So I wanted to start with just wrapping back around with that discussion from the last meeting. Overall, we had 796 respondents of the survey. 538 of those were students, 102 parents, and 138 staff members. Primarily students is who responded to it. It would be NAMS in the high school. Looking at the demographics of the respondents, we have about 79% who identified as English as a primary language and 25% who identified as Spanish as a primary language. We do have some that identified as both. So a little bit about the demographics of the survey results.
I mean, before we go further, do you have a sense for how many Biden take the survey?
Well, we sent the survey out to all high school students and Neil Armstrong students, and then Dr. West.
Yeah, we sent it through our communication channels, through our newsletter. It's on the website. So it was sent directly to families, to staff.
Ideally, every family would have been aware of it, that's when they were not questioning. But
Yeah,
if that was in it, was to
Yeah.
make every family aware and have every family be invited, as well as all staff members
correct.
and all students.
No, well, not all students. We sent
Okay,
it to secondary students at
sorry.
Neil Armstrong High School. Correct. So families, community members, students at the high school and middle school who wanted an opportunity to respond had that opportunity through direct mailing or direct emailing. We also had it posted on our list, so people could respond through the website.
Has this been done in past years or is it been new?
I'll have to pitch that question.
The push was much more significant than in historical years. In historical years, we developed a survey, had a couple of respondents, didn't get a lot of results. This time we really pushed it out a lot more on all of our communication channels. Having 796 respondents for a survey is pretty good compared to what we've seen in the past.
Pretty impressive.
So-
I have to say, I'm kind of scratching my head about the student response rate being as high as it is, like, do they get credit or something? Yes, but it is, but how did you do that?
Hey, Eileen, along the same lines, how many staff members does the district have? Total, just around about.
British, right? It's all-
We have about 800 something FTE, I don't remember the exact.
Okay, thank you.
So we have 733 FTE built into this current year's budget, so, but there could be a lot of partial FTEs in there, so total employees would be much more.
The employee response rate is not overwhelming, significant.
Thank you for the question.
So page 1 in the book, it has 411 licensed teachers, 330 classified staff, and 12 confidential supervisory, 28 administrators. So that's who we have today in our system for number of employees.
Thank you.
All right, so looking at one of the questions we asked, we really only asked 2 questions. The first one was check your top 3 most important priorities the district should be focusing on. And again, these questions led with a video and kind of an information sheet on why we were asking these questions to try to lead up to them. Overall, looking at these, safety and security was by far the highest response, followed by counseling, mental health, after school activities, and class size. The sheet you have in front of you breaks those numbers down by whether it's students, parents, or community and what their responses are. The green highlight is the top 3 in each of those classifications. So you can kind of see the difference between the groups and how they responded to this question. Primarily, community, staff, and parents were pretty consistent. Students is where we had some variables. Their priorities were primarily after school activities and clubs, counseling and mental health, and then safety and security. So when we look at the results by group, the next question that we asked was check the 3 areas you would consider for budget reductions. This one identifies district supports administration, professional development, and curriculum as the top 3. And then again, on your printout, you can see the difference between the groups. Staff, parents, and community were pretty well aligned, where students was just a little bit different. Showing class size, curriculum, and technology. And then the last 2 groups on the sheet that you have are up here on the screen. But it's asking the same 2 questions, but it's just broken out differently instead of broken out by what group response it is, but by the primary language in the household. So we can see if there is a variance in our demographics of our community and how they respond as comparison to the students and parents difference. So it's just more information that we were looking at. There was a couple of fields for, describe why you chose this, and it's been really fun reading those. So we've been really going through that. But any questions on the data for the survey response? Okay. Now to get into the proposed budget. In your book that you have, some of this you'll be able to follow along. A lot of it, I just took pieces out. So the blue marker in your book starts a section that's called Budget at a Glance. And this is the meat of the budget book. This is the report showing and kind of summarizing the behind all of the details behind it. So the Budget at a Glance is the start with the major budget assumptions. Built into this budget is the state school funded at $11.4 billion state school fund allocation. 49% year one, 51% year two. It is based on the co-chairs and the governor's recommended budgets. We will not know what the actual state school fund is, probably until later this month or late June. So sometime between now and the end of June, by the time we know what this is. So it is an estimate at this time. Investments in the strategic plan, investments in teaching and learning for instruction, curriculum development, expanding dual language into Neil Armstrong, focus on early literacy, sustaining our mental, social, behavioral, and health supports, investment in family resource center, and financial stability and resilience. Many of these things were in Dr. West's message. Continuing on, looking at our grant funds, all of our grant funds, we know there's a lot of uncertainty around federal funding for this upcoming year. We're budgeting current service level, going into next year. However, we are planning on the 75%, 50% or zero with many of our federal grants. So we are doing that work behind the scenes, not knowing how that impact is going to happen. We are rolling forward current service level allocations for our federal funds. Two of the other big grants that we have that are not federally funded is your High School Success and Student Success Act. Student Success Act is 6.1 million and High School Success is 1.9 in this budget. For debt service, we do have an investment into our PERS reserve. Our current PERS bond sunsets in 2025, so that rate credit will go away in 2027. So the next biennium, so we are continuing to increase our PERS reserve slightly to help offset that increase in PERS rates when that credit sunsets. The rest of the funds, all of the funds actually impacts, we do have a projected COLA and insurance cap increase into this budget. We are in active negotiations with both union groups. So right now, it's just an estimate, it's a proposed, we still have to bargain those and that could impact this budget. We are maintaining class size averages at our current targeted class size average. I have a slide in a little bit about that. And then we have the $1.8 million reductions built into our general fund.
I mean, what overall makes you feel when federal grant?
Give me a couple of slides. Okay. As far as looking at this budget, we have $240 million in resources in this upcoming year, of which 42% is our general fund and 9% is grants. And then we have our food service, our debt, and our capital projects. Our capital projects is still pretty significantly high, and that is because we are still working on all of our construction through the bond. As the bond work continues to get completed, that percentage will start to shrink in the next couple of years. So that is mostly our bond work. Looking at our resources in another way. Right. Slide. We have of the $240 million, 17% is local, 33% of that is state, 4.5% or $10.8 million is federal funds. And then we have some transfers. And then our beginning fund balance is 43%. So that's the beginning fund balance rolled forward into the new year. A lot of that is going to be the capital projects fund, our resources for our bonds. The bump out.
Eileen, what's transfers?
Transfers is going to be, we have our Sharp debt payment. So we use construction, excise tax and general fund to pay for that. So we transfer those resources into the debt service account and then pay for that debt in there.
Okay.
So we have our Sharp debt, our 20, should put it down. Our David Hill property purchase, our turf replacement, fund, reserve fund that we transfer into. So those three things.
Okay, perfect. That makes sense.
Great question. The bump out here is the same information except for pulling out beginning fund balances. So we can see of those new resources that we have put into this budget, where those resources are coming from. So 31% is local, 59% state, and only 8% of our new resources are federally funded. Looking at all of our expenditures district-wide, so this is all expenditures, all funding sources. 34% is instruction, 20% is support services, and then that facilities acquisition and improvement, that's primarily those bond funds, 26%, and 15% for debt service. So that's the repayment of all of our bond funds primarily, and the Ski Chart and David Hill properties.
I mean, if we weren't doing a major bond upgrade construction, what's a normal typical percentage for that facility? Improvements?
Without a bond, it would be pretty low. We don't do much capital facilities improvements without a bond. It would be a couple $100,000 if it's just general fund paying for that, it's gonna be maybe a $40,000. Or a replacement of a boiler, or, you know, it's gonna be small items that we just can't fund,
It's a big significance are almost all the
primarily bond. Yeah. Our goal in the past, and our goal with this current bond is to hold some interest revenue. So that if a boiler goes out or an HVAC unit goes out between now and the next bond, we will have resources set aside to be able to support that. So that's what we've done in the past, is hold a little bit of that interest so that we can accommodate some of those big ticket items. Looking at the expenditures, just the same expenditures, just looking at it a different way by major object instead of by major function. Salaries and benefits. Salaries and benefits is about $82 million total, 43% combined. Services is 12%, and your capital outlay, that's the same, your 4,000 function from the prior one. It's your bond projects, 21%, and then debt services, your 15% again. Now, general fund, because that's where we have the most control of our resources. All of our other resources, our grants, our debt service, our capital projects, those, we get those resources for a particular purpose, and that is how we need to use those. Our general fund is what we have the control on. That's what we pay electricity for teachers. That's how we operate day to day. So I wanted to focus primarily on general fund next. Looking at our general fund resources for next year, we'll have $101.9 million built into this budget. 22% is local, 75% is state. When we look at these resources, and the state school fund formula, I have the state school fund formula to the right. It includes your common school fund, your state school fund, your county school fund, and local property taxes. That accounts for 96% of our resources next year, 96% of our new resources. That is all enrollment driven. Enrollment goes up, our resources will go up. Enrollment goes down, our resources go down. Regardless of which bucket it is, it's all part of that equalization formula. Looking at, because our revenue is so focused on enrollment, I did want to just share one, I guess the last 4 or 5 years, 5 or 6 years, on enrollment changes. This is pandemic, post-pandemic. We are budgeting next year 5,400 students in the district. It is declining over the last several years. That is primarily from our incoming kinder class sizes being so small in comparison to our exiting senior classes. Even with move-ins into the community, it's not enough to offset the declining birth rates. So that is something that we'll have and be aware of, and we are looking at and using our demographic study to help support us for long term. As you can see, the 11th grade and 10th grade and 9th grade, those are all in the high 400s, and our incoming kinders are in the low 300s. So, we do have this ongoing, it's gonna take us the next 10 years to build back our enrollment.
Interesting, because in the community, there's a pretty widespread assumption that we need more schools. So, why aren't you building more schools? I hear that a lot when I go to the community. And
We are still down 5% from pre-pandemic. We lost 5%, we are still down 5% of our enrollment from pre-pandemic.
That is a state trend and a national trend,
It is.
so it's not a forced growth thing.
No,
And that's a state and national trend that is just happening right now.
Yeah.
So,
people see new subdivisions coming in and they just assume that schools are gonna be just crowded.
Yeah, young families can afford those houses that are built.
Yeah, right.
Right, and talking with our city colleagues, it's going to be a few years before the permits for the multifamily dwellings are realized, before those structures are built, so we're several years out from seeing any kind of increase in it.
Yeah, I think I remember Dave Parker too talking, I think I asked the same question last year and he gave the example that, you know, some of the newer buildings over by the high school, out of all the houses that got built there, there was a handful of families that had student age kids in it. You're like, really? But you know, like Valerie said, they're expensive.
one of the examples, a few years back, the community built, those new apartments over there by, Ace Hardware.
Yeah.
Those apartments, and it was gonna bring in 100 new elementary kids, and I think we ended up with 5.
Yeah.
Wow.
After it was built. So it's the new homes and new apartments, and it's just not bringing in the new enrollment, for that.
I'm wondering also, the messaging, I know the school district has been messaging that, and I don't know what you all would think, but it does feel like it's breaking through to general community and state and nation that enrollment is down in public schools. It feels like most people are aware of that soundbite. I'm not sure beyond what we're pushing out as a school district, where is the communication happening around some of those pieces that you're mentioning around the community, just connecting that decline directly to the budget, and then also kind of myth busting the idea that we are going to be having, because we have talked about it for a couple of years, but it seems like the same theme is still occurring. So just, I don't know if that's a communications discussion maybe, but outside of schools, is that actively being?
well, we had that discussion post pandemic, thinking that the enrollment was gonna go up after everybody got solid again. And because of the enrollment and the way that the exiting seniors and then compared to the kinders, it's still staying fairly low, so. But there needs to be some type of messaging.
Well, and with the one school board meeting, when we did put up, and I think Dr. West, you specifically started to talk about that enrollment with staffing and then also future. And I think there were people even in the room there that was kind of the first time some connections were made to those points. And so maybe as a part of a budget message that we can think about how to have our city partners elevate that, or I don't know. Anyway, that's my comments on that.
So kids are not moving into the community. That's why the enrollment is down. But do we have any statistics about kids going to private school?
I'm looking that up as you speak.
Oh, you are.
Yeah, because I've actually only sold homes to families in those neighborhoods by David Hill. However, I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, at least 4 of probably 6 send their kids to either Visitation, Forest Hills. They have the economic ability to send their kids to private education. So I wonder if there is some overlay of.
And I think that's a great question, Nicholas. We were just talking about that with OSBA at the OSB level, that districts are able to pull homeschool numbers and some things like that, but my understanding is there really wasn't a way right now to track kids who aren't in the system and not in a homeschool system connected to a district per se, and where they're attending outside of
the only proxy that we have for that here within the district is that we do track the number of students that we lose or gain by grade level every year. And what is interesting to see is that we do lose a handful of students. I think the most recent data I was looking at is at that transition between fourth and fifth grade. It looks like we lose about 40 students per year-ish, and I mean, please jump in if I'm misrepresenting that. But then we also get a lot of those students back at ninth grade. We tend to get somewhere in the neighborhood about 50 or 60 kids back for ninth grade. So it balances out. What I think we're seeing, what those data suggest to me is that there are a number of families that are choosing private school. It could be the Waldorf school, it could be visitation. That some are choosing that for K-8, and then we see the students in grade 9 when they come to us. Some are choosing that for a period of time, maybe just those middle school years, but then they come back to us for the high school years.
That's been a trend for years. So, I mean, for as long as I've been here, so, yeah, it's been a trend.
Right, looking at the general fund expenditures built into this budget, $92.1 million, 61% is instruction and 38% is support services. And the details are on page 38. So you can see on here and follow along if you would like. Breaking down the same $92 million, but by major object, 51% is salaries, 27% is payroll costs, 17.8% services, 3% supplies, and then the last 1% is most likely that transfer for the ski share property purchase. Our ending fund balance in the budget, proposed budget in front of you for the general fund maintains an 11.2% ending fund balance. It's slightly less than what we had built into the 25 budget, but right in line with where we've been trending the last few years. And this is really so that we can look at that long-term financial stability. More specifically, in looking at our expenditures, general fund FTE in this budget is 17 FTE less than the prior year's adopted budget. Most of that is in the classified group. One of the main reductions that we'll talk about in a moment is classified IAs. Class sizes, our district target is 23.5 for K4, 29 for 5-6, 25.7 for 7-8, weighted it's 30-1, and then 23.5 for 9-12, weighted it's 32-1. So that's been the target we've been looking at the last couple of years. This year, we maintain that target, we're slightly below at those different buckets. This year we did look at really focused on the K1-2, and we looked at title versus non-title to make sure that that was the priority in the allocation model. But these are our averages. You will always have bubbles in one place or another depending on that staffing model. As far as the budget reductions built into this budget, as Dr. West talked about, we had $1.8 million worth of reductions. And we also adjusted for class size. This year, we had a significant loss of enrollment and we didn't adjust for class size. This upcoming budget maintains our targets, slightly below our targets in areas. But in order, because of that reduction in enrollment, we did reduce 8.3 FTE, classroom FTE, and that was before we built that budget up and looked at what it was going to take to balance it. So we have that 8.3 FTE reduction, plus we have a $1.8 million reduction to balance the budget. With that $1.8 million, we have 54% of that was district level expenditure reductions, 46% of that was classroom or building level reductions. And then we also looked at what was sustainable reductions versus one-time or short-term reductions. 71% is sustainable reductions, things that once we reduce this year, we can maintain the reduction year over year. And then 29% is one-time or short-term reductions that we were able to go without this upcoming year.
Meaning that we might have to have it in the future year. This new jargon, go back to the second or some. Struggling to parse through some of the acronym there.
Okay.
Let's see. SPE.
Special education.
SLP.
Speech language pathologist.
Acronyms.
Acronyms.
Have a cheat sheet too on the drive.
You are not the only one.
The last page is.
In the back of the book is actually an acronyms cheat sheet, so
Okay.
if you guys.
There you go,
just
David.
have- There is an
I knew it
acronyms
was
cheat
there, but I was
sheet
too
here.
lazy to go look.
But no, I appreciate the question, sorry, we use a lot of those acronyms.
I'm caught up.
Eileen, could you, the reduction in teaching and learning curriculum and professional development, is some of that the non-adoption of the extension of some of the curriculum that we were gonna adopt? Is some of that included in that?
It's also a couple of vacancy savings, so some positions we're choosing to not fill that are
Okay.
vacant, so it's a combination of factors.
I guess could I ask, the follow-up would be then. In the next budgeting cycle, would those be pieces that would be brought back at least? Because we already have plans for the curriculum adoptions that need to happen, so they're not. Is that removed here, but assume that that will be,
Yeah, curriculum is a little tricky. We can only delay it for so long. We made the choice. So that's an example of a one-time savings that we may not be able to sustain. We may have to come back to it next year. We would need department approval at the state level if we were to extend it beyond this 1 year, and that seems unlikely. But there could be other trade-offs that we need to make, that we could make next year to compensate for that.
well, and I was thinking the opposite, I would be reluctant to have people assume that that then. Would mean that we could delay, I would wanna make sure that we could,
It's
Ma-
coming one way or another, whether it's this year or next
Right.
year.
okay, yeah, okay.
All right, so this is the general fund cash flow for this current fiscal year. This is the format that we typically give. It's 2 years of historical data, the current year's adopted budget, where we are to date, where we project to be through the end of the year, and the variance. The top section is the resources, the bottom section or lower section is expenditures, and the bottom section talks about the ending fund balance. Overall, this year, we are looking at ending with about $4.5 million of additional ending fund balance than what we had built into the adopted budget. That's about 5% increase in our ending fund balance, which is standard to what we have seen in the past. I think a few slides ago, the ending fund balance. So you can see here where we budget and then we save. And then we budget back down and we save. So that trend is really important for us. For being able to have a soft landing in the end and to be able to kind of balance out those waves by budgeting conservatively and saving throughout the year. So that 5% is something that we have been doing for a few years now.
And just to point out, there's a spike that you'll notice if you go back to that graph, please. The spike that you see in 2022, 2023, we had for a period of time federal resources, COVID relief funds that we were able to use to shift some of our expenditures. That's one of the reasons why every district in the state for a short period of time saw increases in their ending fund balance. Those funds are gone. So our typical 5% savings is what we expect going forward.
So. Based on our current cash flow in that $14.2 million, that is gonna be our beginning fund balance rolled forward into next year, so that's our starting point. The reason why it is higher is a couple of things. We have more local resources, interest revenue, and our high school gym floor replacement from an insurance reimbursement is in that first line. And then we have state school fund increase of $1.5 million. That's current year and prior year reconciliations by ODE and increase in forest revenues over and above what we built into the budget. Forest revenues is one of the harder ones to project. And then as far as expenditures, we are below our expenditures $2 million from salaries and benefits, and that's primarily from vacancy savings through the year.
So just a comment, I mean, that has probably been over the last, what? 8 years, 10 years, that having that fund balance has kind of smoothed our year-to-year kind of budgeting process out. And you'll notice that a lot of the other districts that don't have that fund balance right now are making major cuts. And I think one of the nice things, at least for Forest Grove School District, is it's kind of leveled us out where we weren't very level in 2008 through 2013. So those were rough times where we didn't have that fund balance to work with. So just a comment.
Yeah, for comparison, thank you for that. For comparison, we would need about $8 million just to run the district for a month. So if all monies were gone, we would need about $8 million to pay salary, keep the lights on, take out the trash. Having an ending fund balance of $14 million would give us roughly a 2-month cushion in the event that there was some abrupt halt to funding. So it's really important for us, just like we have savings accounts at home, many of us, for those unexpected things. It's important for us as a school district that we have some level of savings so that we can respond to emergencies or respond to the unexpected.
So that $1 million that we won't have, will it come from this in here, or will it come from reallocation of certain monies from area to another area to another?
You're asking about the federal funds that we may not have?
No, there's a 1.9 billion.
Oh, 1.8 million that were reduced.
Yes,
Yeah, that's built into the budget. So this projection that you see right here is inclusive of the 1.8 million.
just inclusive.
Yes.
Okay, so, all right.
So this is that forecast with the beginning fund balance rolled forward into next year. So you can see the 11% ending fund balance at the end. And this budget does have a $9.8 million ending fund balance built into it.
What page is that in this book?
This is not in that book.
Okay,
This
I was like
is-
looking and I couldn't find it, and I was like, here's that, okay.
This is the cash flow and the cash, and so it's taking the budget and putting it into the cash flow model that you're used to seeing on that regular basis through the year. So it's not in this budget, but it's taking this information and putting it into that model. Okay. So then the next slide, what I like to do is take that budget and roll it forward. This is very, very broad, very what ifs. We don't know what's gonna happen necessarily 6 months. We don't know what's gonna happen with the state school fund in the next biennium. So this is a lot of assumptions built into it. But it is looking, if we continue the trend of today, where are we gonna be tomorrow and the next year and the next year? We have historically budgeted conservatively, saved, and come down. And so that allows us to be able to step down and make smaller incremental changes over time so that we're not constantly in this massive reactionary state. And so the next slide, what this does is just takes that same information and shows like The orange line is that 4-year projection and when we would hit that 0 mark for ending fund balance. And then the green line above it is if we were to save 5% every year, like what we have been doing. So that's more of a realistic trend of what we're looking at. And what this means is that we can make small incremental changes this year, we can make small incremental changes next year, we can make incremental changes the year after. As information becomes available and we know more. To look at this and make changes to get to a positive ending fund balance in 5 years is not realistic. But what this allows us to do is make that dramatic changes back and forth into smaller changes to the system, so.
So when we say save by 5%, we're going to not spending 5% of what was allocated.
Right.
Or budgeting resources conservatively and getting more resources by the end of the year. So these are all things that we're looking at as we're developing this budget and building it.
Would you go back one slide, please? I do want to point out that even this current budget, if you look at the very bottom line, it includes deficit spending. If we are planning to spend some of our savings to continue with as many services as we possibly can for students. Now, if additional funding comes through from the state, we can adjust this, go to the board for our reappropriation. But based on what we currently know, the way we carry this forward, as Eileen said, is we make these small incremental changes, but it is draining our savings. Which is why you eventually see on the following slide that that line hits 0. We are spending our savings, so we're very mindful of the fact that these incremental changes that we're making now, we have to sustain those year over year in order to have a soft landing. We have to be thoughtful and careful in the way we expend our resources.
You have an idea of the percentages of districts in the state that would have a similar line? In fact, their top line, I'm sure is closer, but are most districts looking at about that same time before we all just say there's nothing there?
I don't know about most districts. I can say anecdotally, I haven't talked to a superintendent that is not reducing. Now, some, as you've seen in the news, the more dramatic ones are in the news. 20-25% in Reynolds School District. Ashland just announced they have to go out for a $10 million bond to cover their operating expenses. So the bigger reductions that are catching districts off guard, you're hearing about. Anecdotally, everyone's in a cut phase.
So the green line, as the red line starts digressing from it, green line looks rather flat and then it starts to decline. What's the flatness for?
It just depends on the expenditures that are built into this model in comparison to the revenue coming in. This has the governor's recommended budget for this biennium, and then it has an assumption for the next biennium. So the revenue is most likely what's driving a lot of that, along with the increase in costs. So we have step costs every year, we have COLA costs every year. And our resources just are not keeping up with that, along with our PERS rates increases. The PERS rate credit is built, sunset is built into this, so our PERS rates are gonna increase in the next biennium. Plus we're gonna have our final debt payment for that, so that's why we're building our reserves to help offset some of that. So there's a lot of different moving pieces into this.
And this model includes enrollment projections as well.
This model includes maintaining today's enrollment, flat enrollment. It does not include a reduction in enrollment.
Would there be a way to show what that would look like?
You might not wanna look at
I
that.
just wanna- I mean,
If we showed a reduction in enrollment, I would show an offsetting expenditure for
Yeah,
people and FTE associated to that. So I think, They would offset somewhat, but this doesn't show a change in FTE. It's this budget's FTE moving into next year. This enrollment moving into next year. So if we did have an enrollment loss, we would have to make adjustments for. Yeah,
So they're coming up with a forecast. What, tomorrow or early next week? State forecast?
there should be a new revenue forecast coming out. And that should be what they're gonna use to set our state school funds.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
So we basically, just to summarize real quick, the assumptions you put in here are, the 11, sort of whatever the standard, increase the state will generally consider, right, which would be 12.15. So if the state, miraculously decides, well, this year we're gonna crank it up 10% over what we usually do, then it would be more optimistic, but
there's so
Yeah,
many variables
a lot of
in
variables.
this. Yeah, what state school fund's gonna do, what local revenue's gonna do,
Right.
property taxes. What, enrollment can change, what we negotiate during negotiations for COLA and stuff. I mean, there's so many things that can change between today and tomorrow. This is really, it's not to take these as this is set in stone.
Yeah.
It's just to take it as a, knowing that things are gonna change, it's a forecast.
Yeah.
Um,
and
Yeah.
it's really, looking at what the state school fund generally does, in this biennium and the next one, this is probably fairly lighter, right, on our budget, right, is what's the state school fund gonna do?
right.
So-
And with this, I think I took the last few biennium percent changes and just applied that.
Yeah.
So,
That's all I can do.
yeah, you can plan and project the.
4 or 5 years.
Close on one, off on another, like.
Yeah, plus or minus.
Sense, looking at what you're seeing today, trying to project for tomorrow, it is it's a projection on what you believe is gonna happen next
It's your
year.
best shot.
And basically the message is, if we keep, doing the good work that we've been doing and saving a historical, 5% trend, we're gonna, hopefully stay out of the red for at least a few more years and, yeah, that's the best we can do.
Face the music there. Something's gonna have to change.
Yeah,
Small incremental changes year over year, keep looking at this, keep moving that line out every year, keep moving it out.
And hope that advocacy at the state level results in continuing increases in state school funding.
So. All right. We do have coming up next is public comment and discussion and deliberation for the committee. But I did want to take a couple of minutes, and over the last few weeks, since we last met, we've gotten a lot of questions from our budget committee, and I want to make sure that we wrap back around and answer some of those. So that you guys have more information for tonight. So, Dr. West and I will take a couple of minutes to answer some of those questions that we've heard come through. If we missed some, let us know. And then keep moving. One of the questions that came through was, can the budget committee have more regular updates on where we are financially and where we are in the general fund throughout the year? And so on this slide is just some of the things that we are already currently doing. You just maybe not sent to the budget committee directly, but I wanted to make sure everybody was aware of our budget updates that we do already. The cash flow that I shared a few slides ago, we do present to the board or the budget committee November, March, and May of every year. Appropriations is sent to where we stand on our appropriations, year-to-date encumbrance and balance. For the different major funds and functions is sent to the board monthly in the board packet. We do a general fund budget update by budget control code, so that's whose budget responsibility it is. It's a summary report sent to the board monthly. We have our annual financial audit, and then we have our board financial oversight committee. And those are all for the general fund. And then we do also have our bond oversight committee that's active quarterly right now, and we present an SIA annual report. So one of the questions I had is there additional information that you guys would want to see throughout the year over and above this?
I think it would be nice to have something. You mentioned cash flow in November to the school board. Maybe the budget committee could get a half-year progress report where we are at the halfway point. Determining what kind of, how accurate we are, or what jokers in the deck have. And I'm using the wrong terms there, but what has happened?
Yeah.
That is mixed up the works.
So we're at what the major variances are.
So the
Oh,
presentation,
you say it so much better.
so the presentation we give to the school board, or go ahead and send it to you all, so you have access to it.
That would work, that would be fine with your phone.
We could do that. Okay. Anything else? Great, the next one is budget process. A question came up about the budget process and presenting the proposed budget earlier in the year. A couple of different things with that. Typically, we do it in May because we have the most information we can, and we wait as kind of as long as we can to finalize it, so we have as much accurate information. Knowing that it's still gonna change, the legislative session still has to close, but we can get closer. This is late in the year that we can do it and still meet all of our legal timelines and being able to have an adopted budget. And then the other thing is just staff capacity. We have one finance team. And so we typically focus most of our time July through December on our financial audit. And then starting January, we kick off the budget process. So this budget process starts the 1st of January, and we're doing a lot of the prepping in December over Christmas break. So doing that any earlier would just selfishly from me and my department would to do the actual proposal. We can definitely shift. One of the questions here was looking at priorities discussion with this budget committee earlier and starting the priorities conversation earlier in the process. We can definitely do that. Look at shifting just the structure of it, but proposing the budget in May is kind of where we'd like to be.
Yeah, I think this timeline, to be blunt, is really necessary for operations of the district because there's so many moving parts that start to fall into place right now. For example, we have a good idea of where the co-chairs are gonna land with their budget. In January, we don't know. We don't know where they're gonna land. So it's hard, in January, all we're doing is throwing darts in the wind. Come March, April, May, we're getting closer to the target because there've been some indicators from the state about what that's going to look like. So there are good reasons to keep the timing for the actual budget development. In terms of engagement with the budget committee, the community, our students, our families, Eileen and I have had some conversations about pushing that forward and doing that a little bit differently so that we have earlier opportunities to build that input into our process.
And then another question that came up was a budget committee member wanting to see the department budget details. And we don't look at we don't necessarily bring the specific details from line items to this budget committee. Those submissions are really to the superintendent, and then the recommendations are built into the budget document itself. So
Well, that sort of goes back to what is not the budget committee role, then.
yeah. Okay.
Thank you for reminding us that.
Thank you. So the next slide, quality of curriculum and instruction. I'll let Suzanne.
Yeah, I'll take this. This one is a little tricky. I'm gonna answer it two ways. So the quality of curriculum as text, for example, is somewhat governed by the state. They go through a vetting process for curriculum and they help us identify curricular materials that meet standards that are of high quality. But there's another aspect to this, which is what does that implementation actually look like in the classroom? And there's two ways we can measure the quality of implementation of curriculum and instruction. One is an implementation measure. So for example, a couple of years ago, we rolled out a new literacy curriculum at the elementary level. You've heard us reference this multiple times. Implementation measures look like walking into every single classroom and seeing if teachers are actually using the materials. And then if they have the materials open, are they using those materials the way they're intended? So implementation measures are one of the things that we can look at to assess the quality of our instructional program. But the other way that we can assess that are through measurements like this, where we see our students showing the level of growth that is expected of them in a given year. What you see here right now is growth by grade level, K through 6, and the percentage of students that are meeting expected growth for the given year. It's not where we want it to be. We would love for these bars to be 100%. But it's better than it has been, so we are making progress. And that tells us that the work that we are doing is having the intended outcome. We are moving in the right direction. Further to go, but at least we know the initial steps are making the difference that we expect them to. How we get there is through adopting high quality curriculum, making sure that they have the skills that they need to teach well. They get coaching and support. Sometimes through a teacher on special assignment, sometimes through school leaders coming alongside and offering feedback. We've increased the amount of time that staff have to collaborate with each other. If any of you are familiar with Dr. John Hattie's research, collective efficacy, which means our collective belief as a teaching team that we can make a difference in outcomes for the kids, that is the highest effect size in outcomes for students, is that teachers believe that they make a difference. So when they can collaborate together, we know that we see student outcomes increase. And then we want to decrease variability between classrooms. And that goes back to the implementation factor. Are we all using amplifier? Are we all using it the way it's supposed to be used? So all of that combined leads to outcomes like you see right here. Next slide, please.
I have a question, please.
Sure.
I've been reading more about school, Rosecross School District, because I'm running for the vote. I ran through a slide where it shows we lack 14% or 24% for language and student and social science and mathematics. We're about 14 to 24%, while the state is about 40%. Now we're talking about the curriculum. Is it because of the curriculum? Is it because of what? The average is so low like that on these two different things on the curriculum. Do we know?
That seems like such a simple question, and the answer is so complex. There are a number of variables that impact state assessments. One of those variables is that families can opt their students out of the assessment process. So that score that you're seeing doesn't actually include a measure of all of our students. Another variable is that we are educating our elementary students, 37% of them, in 2 languages. We know through decades of research that it takes on average 5 to 7 years for a student learning English to acquire English proficiency. But we're assessing them in grade 3, knowing that they have not yet mastered academic English. That affects the outcome on the assessment. The assessments are a single point in time. So you have questions that you need to answer, like, did the child eat that morning? Did they have an argument with their brother on the way out the door? Did their dad not come home last night? Are they just cranky that day? I mean, there could be any number of things that could input the outcome on a test. We also have a state system, to be very candid, where not a lot of people buy into the measure. We don't think there's a lot of value in that state assessment. If you read to any degree what people think of the Oregon State Assessment System, it's generally pretty low in terms of what does that assessment actually tell us about instruction. So there isn't the buy-in that we might invest otherwise if we believe that that was a good measure to inform instruction. Any one of those factors in and of themselves could drive assessment scores down collectively, and there are others that I haven't even mentioned. They do impact outcomes on assessments. So I'm not in any way trying to make excuses for why our scores are where they are. We want to improve those. But they may not also be the very best measure of what our students are actually learning in our schools. That's why we do these local assessments and why we measure growth. We want to know that our young people are actually meeting at minimum 1 year's growth each year in math and reading. I can spend some time with you one-on-one if you really want to dig into it. It's a really complex question.
But in my mind, it's just like, is it public education? With the private education would give me different statistics comparing to the whole state.
Well, private education doesn't have to take the state test,
They
so
don't.
it's hard to assess that.
Okay.
I do think one thing that I didn't mention before, which is worth considering, is that if you look at those state assessment results, you can predict which students will do well on the assessment. Students in districts with a higher socioeconomic status do much better on those assessments than students with a lower socioeconomic status. You could say the same thing about some underserved student groups divided up by race. And I mentioned language earlier. So there are some factors that are predictable in the assessment that I think we should ask questions about, that cause me to question the validity of the assessment and how useful it is in telling us whether or not students are growing year over year. That said, we do want improvements, and we're working really hard to do that.
What was the last name of the guy named John that you referenced?
Dr. John Hattie.
Dr. John.
Okay, next slide, please. There were also questions about student absenteeism. Again, this answer is probably not going to be very satisfying because it's a complex answer. In terms of what contributes, we have a list there of all the things that we know. We have attendance teams that meet at each of our schools. They generally meet once a week. To answer this question, I went into our documents where attendance teams are tracking the reasons why young people are not coming to school. These are some of the reasons that were most common, but there were a lot more. As I said before, the reasons why students don't come to school are highly individualized. On the right-hand side, these are some of the things that we are doing to address chronic absenteeism. As I mentioned, we have attendance teams at each of our schools that meet about once a week. We have home visits. We actually have an attendance liaison that will go to students' homes, talk to parents, invite students back into our environment, try to remove barriers. We are building out our multi-tiered systems of support so that we're able to identify students earlier. And again, try to remove those barriers to attendance. Positive adult connections. We talked about that last time. It makes a huge difference when kids have relationships. We are maintaining our counseling ratios. This ASCA recommendation, it's very rare to find these ratios in school districts in the state. The fact that Forest Grove meets this ratio, this recommended ratio, I think is a benefit to our students. They have access to counseling in a way that students don't. We have mental health professionals. And then when students feel connected to school, they come to school. And so we have a lot of focus on that these attendance teams are working on. And there were many, many, many more reasons and actions that the attendance teams were taking to try to address absenteeism. Again, the answer may not be very satisfying because we're not able to say, this is the reason that kids are not coming to school. The answer really is, these are the reasons why kids are not coming to school. And for a particular student, what is the reason and how do we work with that student? Yes,
I would add, you mentioned one of the contributions to chronic absenteeism, student health. I would give its own dot to the student health center that we have at Forest Grove School
yeah,
as to improve regular attendance, that if a kid has chronic health problems, that the school district has something in place to address that in a non-threatening environment. So I guess I'm just pushing for a specific dot for
yeah.
the health center.
Junior Garcia Health Center is incredible and provides a great service to students. And we have some students with health needs that are chronic.
Yeah.
And that often prevents them from coming to school. Next one, please.
So there was a question about administrative positions in the district and administrative support. So I wanted to we look at administrative positions in a couple of different ways. We have administrative positions and support at the building level, and then we also have the district level. At the building level, our primary allocations, we have an administrator for each building. We have vice principal for our larger buildings and our secondary deans. We have a lead secretary for every building, assistant secretary for those elementaries that are larger. And then our secondaries have additional counseling and support, like or additional secretarial support for their buildings, counseling, athletics, registrar, receptionist, and a bookkeeper. So this is kind of our current staffing model for administrative support and administrative positions at the buildings. And then
Which elementary school has the dean of students? That
That-
250.
that would be Top Hall.
But
This,
is that 600, they're showing one for the 250 to
Oh.
600 and one for 600 to 8.
all four of our large elementaries have dean of students.
So they don't have a vice principal, they have a principal and a dean of students, a Harvey Clark,
Correct.
Joseph Gale.
Cornelius and Echo. And then on page 8 in your book is the district office organizational chart. So this shows our staffing model for the district, outside of buildings.
What page was that?
Page 8. Any questions on the admin positions and the structure of the district? Okay. The next one is our school lunch program and an interest in wanting to bring more local produce into our school meals in our district. And so I just wanted to show a couple of things that we are doing already, and first and foremost, our meals are federally regulated, so we have to meet minimum requirements for any student meal. In addition to that, we have to have pretty strict insurance requirements and requirements around the processing and where the food comes from, for the safety of our students. But that being said, we do have a couple of partnerships right now. We have a couple of grants, Oregon Farm to School Grant and the USDA DOD Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Program that we have. Both of these are bringing in local spend, whether it's a local food manufacturer in our area or it's local produce. So this year alone, we've brought in $8,000 worth of apples, pears, oranges, and strawberries from within our region, locally grown. And then the last one is just something that we've been focusing on this year is really looking at our meal program improvements and understanding what student needs are. And what student interests are. So there's been a couple of focus groups at Neil Armstrong and the high school in just understanding what students would want to see on the menu line. How can we have more culturally diverse meals on the rotating menus. And so we've been able to really work with students on that and introduce several new items onto our menus, whether it's elementary or middle or high this next year or this current year already. And we have done a few pilot taste tests and implemented a couple of those items already into our reoccurring menus. And we're looking to really just expand more through that. It's slow, but we're getting there. But we really want them to be student-driven meals.
Sure. One of the other questions that was asked is, how do we partner with local businesses and our high school specifically? This is just a snapshot. Our high school partners with more than 30 local businesses. Those local businesses do a few things with our high school students. Sometimes they come in and co-teach a class. Sometimes they offer mentoring or internships. Sometimes they're just offering support for kids as they're learning. A good example of that, I mentioned the Viking House before. When I've been out to the Viking House, there's always those in the construction trade working right alongside our students and offering guidance and very quick correction if they do something wrong. So those are the kinds of partnerships that our CTE teachers cultivate in our community. They're very valuable to us. They're valuable to our students. Many of our students that experience these partnerships go on to work in the industries in which they've had those direct connections with our community partners. So it's something that we continue to foster. A lot of these individuals, I've talked to a few of them, they do this work quietly because it's important to them. They come along students because it matters to them that they give back and that they mentor the next generation of electricians and the next generation of engineers. They don't necessarily advertise this work that they're doing, but it is happening in our school spaces and they're really valuable partners for us. What questions do you have about that?
With that being said, this is the end of what Dr. West and I have for you tonight. I think the next couple of things on the agenda is for Val to take off with. We've presented the budget, the best budget that we know that we put in front of you. Now we're here as an advisory team.
Okay, thanks, Dr. West and Eileen, very much. Appreciate your time spent on this. I don't think we have any public comment, but I'll just clarify, we do not. So at this time, does the budget committee have any questions, comments, or requests to Eileen or Dr. West? Or anything they want to discuss amongst ourselves at this time? Okay, so,
I do
Okay.
have a question. So I think one of the slides had the teaching and learning cuts at about 9.3%, I think.
Of the department.
Of the department. And I noticed on the survey that professional development kind of ranked fairly high in one of those areas to consider for cuts. So I guess my question would be how much, and for later, but how much of the 9.3% can drill down to
To professional learning.
yeah, no professional development, well,
Yeah.
yeah.
Professional learning. I'm gonna take a stab at this, but I may also phone a friend
Okay.
sitting in the back of the room there. I think specific to professional learning, the answer is 0. These reductions are coming from a postponed curriculum adoption. So
Okay,
that's
okay.
one piece of it. As I mentioned before, we have a couple of vacancies that we've decided we're not going to fill. Those are savings in this upcoming budget as well. And then I'll ask our director back here to step in. All of the other reduction.
Yeah, I mean, we try to protect professional learning as much as we can. But there, you know, in the adoption packages in general,
Yeah.
we're trying to streamline professional learning, right? We have limited time and limited resources, so. You know, the idea of pulling teachers out, we're gonna reduce that.
Okay, you're talking about new curriculum.
Yeah,
Okay,
ongoing curriculum training as well. So for example, the literacy training, the math adoption that have happened. Where it's expensive to do professional learning.
Okay, I guess maybe for next time, a question I might have is in terms of professional learning. Could we have that broken out? So that we see what percentages for adoption, what percentages for other things, and what those other things are. That's what I'm interested in.
Yeah. I'd like to talk just for a minute, we talked about this last time, about the survey and the connection to the budget, and I think I personally did not take this survey, and I remember last meeting saying, wait, there was a video, and I actually went back to watch the video myself. I don't know how many on the budget committee saw, took the survey or had access to the video. I know we did all have access. It was it's all the places that you saw. But I'm an example of someone that didn't give feedback. Obviously, I can on the board. I think what this survey says to me is we talked about this, there's a lot of maybe the way we come back to people who took the survey with, we see what's here. But let me tell you why curriculum is actually one of our high quality instruction is one of our strategic plan goals. And I don't know, I'm really interested in completely maybe not doing this survey next year and getting feedback from people almost in the way we do it here. Like I'm kind of even loving the explanation of what's happening with the food meals and how that, the detail of what is going on at the district level, I think is very helpful to people. So I'm just curious about a format where even something like this can be presented, like this is why we're doing it this way. And what do you think? Because essentially that's what we're doing. But I think some people that maybe take this survey and then publicly when we say like the majority curriculum is the least important. Dr. West talked about this. Well, that means we need to explain to people why curriculum is one of probably the most important areas of focus when we're talking about how we deliver instruction. But it's your example that you gave in this meeting of going into the classroom and observing how it's being implemented, and then also observing how it's being, received. To be able to hear that, I think just somehow broadening our communication with the community about why the budget is already the way it is. I would think some people, there's quite a few people that mentioned class size. And we mentioned, I had shown Pete when you said John Hattie, I actually had that written down on this sheet because we talked in the boardroom about how the greatest variance in outcomes is between classrooms right now. Class size is number 186 on a list of things where Dr. West mentioned the things that actually make a difference for kids. So how can we start that conversation of communicating with the community? I understand why people, especially a parent or a student, would grasp at class size because it's hard to know what else you feel like might change, but when we can start to have a broader discussion about why quality instruction is important and why we are going to budget to support those items. I don't know. I'm gonna round it out there, but this is a lot of students, which is awesome. And I love the idea of next year, like trying to get as many students as possible and keeping that completely separate as a learning tool to be able to go in front of students and say, hey kids, here's what we saw. I would love to do that, to go to NAMS and talk to student groups and say, here's the data you turned in and let me tell you where this is reflected or why it's not. And I think we need to do the same thing for the community. This is why we're going to spend the money here, but this is also why we're not focusing on a few of these things you mentioned. I don't know if there's thoughts on how broadly that survey did go out, and maybe I do hear people say, well, we take the survey, and some people expect that if they take a survey, then you're going to do what the number one answer was. We've all experienced that ourselves. So I just think clarity in how we're going to use the information, why we want the information, and also highlighting some things that we maybe need to do a better job. I mean, not you all, but we as community members, just talking with our community about some of these responses.
Because you're talking about next year's budget.
Yes,
Okay,
yeah.
yeah.
We'll make a note of that for our process next year. Thank you.
Is the video that accompanied the survey still available to anyone who wants to pending late to the party?
Yeah, we can push the link out to the budget committee, looking at our communications director for help with that.
Well, the results of the survey relate to the community at all? With a letter or something to what the survey said
To recap the survey results
With the community.
with the community?
with the
Yeah.
community, yeah, I wonder if that would be appropriate to include with the approved budget. So when we push out to the community, here's what the approved budget is, here's what we've heard, here's how we were able to incorporate your feedback. And here's some reasons why you may not see your feedback reflected, and we can point to a slide like the one we showed with the competing demands of the things that we are legally required to do.
Makes sense.
Does anybody have any other questions or comments they want brought back for the next meeting? That they don't want to discuss now?
So can I ask you a question? The question I have was, will
Yeah.
will it just be, okay, and there's no right. So that's kind of.
So along that lines.
Yeah, I was gonna say, there's,
This is a lot to digest.
Mhm.
A lot to digest. So I don't expect. You guys to have a ton of questions tonight or to really like go into it. This is definitely a lot. So as you guys have time. We are meeting next Thursday night is the next meeting, to discuss and answer any further questions. What we just ask is that questions are sent to us in advance so that we can prepare and have information ready, so we can have really good and meaningful conversations next Thursday. So, and the other thing is if you would like to meet with either Dr. West or I in the meantime, to go into some of this nitty gritty stuff or the details where you have more that you want behind something, we are happy to meet with you guys. But we just request that the questions are in advance so that we have time to prepare responses and so we can keep moving the process forward. So please feel free to reach out to either one of us. We're here.
and they don't mean like 3 o'clock on Thursday.
4:30 on Friday.
They mean Tuesday by noon, they would like to have a question.
If possible.
Put that in here.
It's in right here, so I'm gonna say it out loud for everybody to hear. So please have your questions to them. Yeah, it's right here. By Tuesday at noon.
That makes sense.
So along that lines, sorry.
Yeah, good job, dude.
There you go. So we meet next Thursday. We do have an optional meeting the following Thursday if we need it. It depends on the year, depends on what's going on, it depends on the budget committee, on what your guys' needs are, if we use that one or not. So we have that held and reserved.
And there are like no stupid questions. This book, it's not, I mean, once, like it took me probably the first 2 years to figure out how to like accurately use it. It was very confusing to me, just because some things are by fund and then, I don't know, it was a lot. So there are no stupid questions, so feel free to ask one of them, any of those. It's not.
I don't have a stupid question, but it's a question in my mind. For the past 40 years, we sat down here with a budget. What are the major differences between this and the last 4 years?
The things that you've seen up there today, the other thing is as you're going through specifically the general fund budget. If you are going through the general fund, all of the general fund function pages have descriptions on the side saying, because we've already kind of done a review of what changed, percentage change, like we've already kind of walked through that. So anything that we pointed out that has a flag and like, why did FTE change or what happened? It's listed on this page. So if there's something not on here that you have more questions about, or something that's on here that you do have questions about, feel free to ask us.
What page is it?
Well, it's throughout the whole general fund book.
It started at like
One for that
49.
section, I just pulled open one page.
Starts on 49.
Yeah, starts on 40.
Staff.
Yeah, maybe this was.
So we tried to, and then at the front of every fund, we tried to explain what that was, the purpose, like the debt funds, it talks about the debt funds, the schedules. What's included in that, so we're, with the redesign of the budget book a few years ago, we're trying to give more information, because if you just look at the accounts and fund and function. Doesn't give you a lot to go from, so the narrative we're hoping is a good resource for you, and we are happy to answer any questions.
I thought you had a condensed page.
The condensed stuff is the stuff at the front, that budget assumptions, that blue tab in your book, that's the meat of it. Yes, that blue tab.
Next year.
But now it's-
It's like, oh. it's
Yeah,
right here.
I like this summarization on the flip side of the funds. That's really helpful. Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, Mark, did you have anything else? Kidding. I'm just kidding. If there is no further business. Oh, Mr. Truax.
Yeah, sorry about that. This may be getting into what the budget committee should not do, and if it is, you feel free to tell me to go to hell. I will anyway.
Yeah.
Even in light of the current administration, there are boatloads of grants available in Washington, DC. We all know that they're out there, and figures in the millions and billions of dollars. What is to prevent us, and I don't want to put more work on Eileen's back or your back or anybody in central administration's back, except maybe John O'Neill. Of going out and hiring somebody in Washington DC, a lobbying firm to sit there for maybe a conglomerate of school districts, Forest Grove, Hillsborough, Beaverton, Gaston, Banks, so on and so forth. And have them sit and watch and write grant proposals. Cities do that all the time, and I know other school districts do it, and I know the state does. But what is to prevent us from squirreling away some of these funds? Get a bang for the buck. We spend $2 and get $10 back. That's a good deal. I don't know, maybe it's something we can mull on over the upcoming year. Maybe it's too late for this year, but to think about something like that as another avenue to get more money into the school district, because that red line and that green line that's going down, it's not gonna go away by wishing.
No, it's a good suggestion. I don't know what the history is in this district of seeking federal grants outside of the formula grants. That is something that we could investigate. I'm aware of some of those grants that are out there. So we'll look into that. That's a really good idea.
In a former life, when I was here in the school district and part of the convention team, they would sit us down and say, these are grants that are available right now. All you need to do is write them, and, you know, we didn't have the time because we were not only on the prevention team, but we're also in the classroom, so. That sort of went by the board, but I know that stuff hasn't changed significantly, and if we had somebody whose job it was in DC or in Salem,
Yeah,
look at that.
we do have access to a grant writer at the Northwest Regional ESD. That may be the place to start investigating your suggestion.
I'll shut up.
Oh, great idea.
But I was also reminded by somebody when Valerie said there's no such thing as a stupid question. I asked a question in high school. My chemistry teacher said, same thing. There's no such thing as a stupid question. But if there were, that'd be one of them, Truax.
I feel like I asked a stupid question when I was like, do you have anything else you want to add? Okay, just,
Know each other.
okay. So, anything else? No, okay. There being no further business, the meeting is adjourned at 7:49 PM. We will see you all next week at 6 on the 15th.
Thanks, Doc. Thank you.
Thank you.